Dear listeners, we're trying something new this month. Instead of looking at the latest and greatest technology, we're looking back and we're focusing on a person. We've had many geniuses working here at Bosch over the years, people that I would call Bosch icons. But listeners who have heard me and us host a few episodes will know we're all massive Bosch fanboys. And here at Bosch, there can be only one icon for me. So here's an entire episode about him, Robert Bosch. Here, have a listen to this. This is the man himself.
Es war mir immer ein unerträglicher Gedanke. Es könne jemand bei Prüfung eines meiner Zeugnisse nachweisen, dass ich irgendwie Minderwertiges liefere.
It's from a recording that's more than 80 years old, but some of his ideas are still quite fresh. Like this soundbite, where he talks about how unbearable the thought was to him that someone could inspect one of his products and find it inferior in any way. So while we can't quite have him here in person, today's special guest is Robert Bosch. His birthday is coming up after all, so here we go.
From know-how to wow. The Bosch Global Podcast.
Here to tell us everything we always wanted to know about Robert Bosch is Dietrich Kuhlgatz.
Hi, Geoff.
Dietrich here is our chief historian at Bosch. Dietrich, can you tell me what made you a Bosch fanboy?
Well, it's a lot what made me a fanboy. I appreciate his stamina. It was a very disappointing time when he started his entrepreneurship. And at the same time, he had the sense for successful products. And at the same time, he took care of his employees in order to preserve good working conditions and fair pay.
And with that in mind, would you say that Robert Bosch is still kind of present in the company today?
Robert Bosch still lives in the company. It is named after him. He has set up the company structure by writing in his last will that the company should be profitable and at the same time give something back to society.
That's right.
Do things to society for healthcare and the understanding of the people. And this is what the company is still doing today and which is guiding us today. So he is a sort of a compass, even if he was born 163 years ago.
That's fascinating. I love the word compass. That's perfect for us. So, dear listeners, you may have noticed that I don't have a co-host here, but Melena is here nonetheless in spirit as she's brought us some voice quotes of Robert Bosch. Here's one.
I don't pay good wages because I have a lot of money. I have a lot of money because I pay good wages.
Dietrich dug into the archive for us and found some really exciting material about Robert Bosch. The first one I want to present here is something that offers a rare glimpse into a young Robert Bosch's mind. It's excerpts from a diary that he kept. It's short. He wrote in it only for a few days, actually while on his first transatlantic trip on board a ship. I think it shows his way with people, as well as his determination that Dietrich already mentioned. The year is 1884. Robert Bosch is 22 years old, and he gets on a steamboat in Rotterdam, Netherlands.
May the 24th, 1884. 12 noon. Departure in beautiful weather. Travelling companions. First cabin, Mr. Sprenger, a Dutchman. The second cabin is occupied by a young Dutchman, Gibbs, son of a schnapps maker. He has a basket full of gin, rum, etc., and delights in constant drunkenness. Then there is my cabin companion, Lakerman, a Dutch farmer, and last but not least, 10 holy sisters from the Rhine, who give the impression of being fairly carefree. May the 26th, 1884. The Germans on board sing a great deal. Everyone praises the Germans for their pretty melodies as well as for their voices. It's a good thing that I was a soldier and have learnt to reflect on my own thoughts. It means I don't suffer from boredom. There's also something pleasant about lying on your back for hours, staring at the stars. Young Gips is seasick and trying to treat his sickness with a radical remedy of cognac and sugar. May the 27th, 1884. A fairly strong wind today. High seas, rain. The air in the cabins is humid and hot. I felt ill as soon as I woke up. It is my opinion that one can also develop seasickness of the mind. However, this doesn't hurt any more than stupidity does. Most of the nuns are still ill. I have been thinking about what drives them to do so much for each other. In a group of 10 people, it surely cannot be that they all get along and like each other. I too love and respect my fellow man, but if someone is not to my taste, he is certain to soon become aware of that, and if he is an honest fellow, we will probably get along acceptably well, because each treats the other with respect. But enough of this, before I give myself seasickness of the mind.
These were some of his thoughts at the beginning of the journey. And we'll continue this journey with him and hear from his diary again later on. Now, to me, this part sounded like an adventure, and also like he quite enjoys the company of others, but at the same time is somehow feeling apart. Dietrich, what do you think about this?
Well, it shows a lot about a 22-year-old man. He looks quite young when we look at the photographs that we have from this time. But when you listen to what he says, he seems to be a very experienced man with a lot of knowledge of people. And what we see here is a man who had wonderful skills being an entrepreneur, because he could read people. He was a very sensible person who had an eye for the right people. And when we look at his time as an entrepreneur, he had an eye for the right people, for the right jobs. So he was no inventor, but he was an entrepreneur. And this made him able to find the right people for whatever, human resources, for sales, or even for research and development. And I think what we see here, or what we read here, what we listen here, is somebody who shows his abilities, which later made him a very successful entrepreneur.
So let's give our listeners a little more information. Let's have the next quote.
It has also been an established principle of mine to cultivate eager associates by letting each individual work independently as far as possible, while at the same time delegating the responsibility that goes with the task.
Sounds like quite some modern management approaches. But at this point in the story, that's still far into the future. What was his goal, Dietrich, for his time in the United States in the first place?
It's quite easy to answer. He was very interested in electrical engineering. And when we look back at his education, he went to school for 8 years. After that, he made a very disappointing apprenticeship. And he started to work as a fine mechanic, but it was always in his mind to do something with electrical engineering, because it was a quite new and very advanced topic. And what could have been a better country to learn more about it than the United States? But it was not easy for him to go there and find a job. And when he was listening to lectures in electrical engineering in Stuttgart, he became aware that this is technology of the future. And so he asked a lecturer if he could make a contact, because at that time, without telephones, without modern communication tools, it was not possible so easy to find someone in the United States to employ him. And so he got a recommendation for a guy in Munich who had a contact to Sigmund Bergmann, a German-rooted American engineer who worked for Edison Machine Works. And so this is how Bosch got a job there. And first he worked for Bergmann in New York and then changed to Edison Machine Works. A very fascinating experience, but with an entrepreneur who was completely different to Robert Bosch, who was a very modest man, whereas Thomas Alva Edison, if we read what Bosch writes about him, was more sort of a showman. But Bosch learned a lot, what helped him to set up a company which was quite advanced and helped him to have his unique selling proposal compared to other small fine mechanic shops in Stuttgart.
Now, if we go a little bit further back from that, where did Robert come from? What was his life experience like up to the point when he finally arrives in America?
This is not so easy to answer because there are a lot of factors. One is he was one of 12 children. He was number 11. His oldest brother was more than 20 years older than him.
Wow.
And only his younger sister was 2 years younger than him. And so it was a very crowded situation. It's
quite a stretch for the parents. It's 24 years of child rearing.
Yes. So a very crowded situation. Robert learned a lot from his older sisters and brothers. And the environment was a very rural situation in a village called Albeck near Ulm in southern Germany, where his parents had an inn with a restaurant and with a brewery. And most of all, they lived by hosting salesmen who took long journeys on their horse carriages from northern to southern Europe. And when he went to school, after his parents had left their farm and had went to Ulm, the next city, he experienced that he was not quite a good pupil. So he was quite disappointed from very, very old teachers, for example, which could not motivate him really to learn and to be curious. But when his father asked him what he wanted to be, he said, "I like biology," but his father recommended a more practical approach to what he wanted to do. And so Robert Bosch started a traditional apprenticeship in fine mechanics. Very disappointing one, by the way, and maybe one of the reasons why he later set up an apprentice department in his company in order to take care for the young people, to enable them to get good education, better than the one Bosch had. And then he started doing different jobs in order to learn much more than he had learned during his disappointing apprenticeship. So, for example, he worked for his older brother Karl, who had a shop in Cologne in Germany. And what did he learn there? Bookkeeping. So step by step, he achieved all kinds of skills that he would later need being an independent entrepreneur. And also, he went to England, and but I think the United States. Also to England after the United States, but I think United States are the most exciting time for him, even in an environment which was quite strange to him, the hire and fire mentality. This was not a kind of a tradition that he really liked because...
Yeah, that's quite different from Germany, yeah?
Yeah, and he really liked to be a sort of a patriarch who takes care of his people and does not fire and hire back them again, depending on the business situation.
And how grateful can we be for that today? As in my view, having been with Bosch for quite some time, we still have retained this approach. We can move along to the next part of the diary, and here we can hear a little bit about what his arrival to the U.S. was like.
May the 31st, 1884. Northwest wind. Fairly brisk. According to various accounts, we apparently encountered a school of 7 whales early today. I'm not entirely convinced of the truth of this statement. That said, there would be room enough for a few thousand such schools out there. Made some more inquiries. The whale story seems to be true. I'm annoyed I didn't see them. June the 2nd, 1884. Wind east to east-northeast. Sky overcast. Warm, pleasant air again. If we continue to have such favourable weather, we could reach our destination by Thursday. I'm anxious to see where my letters of recommendation will get me. I may have to start much further down the ladder after all. June the 4th, 1884. Course west-southwest. Wind the same. Weather good. Sea calm. We've been unusually lucky on our journey. Not only have we made good time, we have also had good weather for the most part, and much to keep us amused due to the many ships, icebergs, etc. If this luck continues in New York, I can be content. I am firmly convinced that nothing can go wrong. However, I also intend to do everything I can to get ahead. It would be very surprising if I were not able to carve a niche for myself in a country where many people have already made a name for themselves, people who did not even have the enthusiasm and willingness to do so. These are qualities that will not be lacking in me. June the 5th, 1884. 11 o'clock. Land is in sight. Brooklyn Bridge. My heart is bursting inside me at all the activity. Come and see.
And this is when the adventure really starts. I don't know about you, but I can basically feel his excitement. And his confidence is also pretty remarkable. 7 years he spends on the road. And then it seems he feels he's really ready to start the business on his own. And so, jumping a few years ahead again, what is his business idea? And Dietrich, how does it go?
The name he gave his small workshop in Stuttgart was Werkstätte für Feinmechanik und Elektrotechnik, which means workshop for fine mechanics and electrical engineering. And you see, the first thing is a traditional one, the basic business for him, but with a lot of competition between him and many others in backyard workshops in Stuttgart. So it was not an easy way, and the first 10 years were quite hard for him. From time to time, he had to pick up money from a rich fruit shop in the front of his workshop because he wanted to pay his people. Every Friday, they got a little envelope with their money at that time. So it was not a very easy time until he really could live his basic idea to set up a new kind of business, which was electrical engineering. But the deciding problem was the municipal authorities of Stuttgart they needed a lot of time until they finally decided to set up an electric power plant in Stuttgart and also an electrical infrastructure in the city. And so it took until 1895 that he could start being a workshop for electrical engineering. So this was the first, I would say, first small, modest success of his company. And the company grew from 2 people, plus Robert Bosch, to up to 20 people. So this could have been the story for years and decades. There was a little bit up and down in the first years, but electrical engineering from 1895 on brought sort of balance to his business. By the way, he was one of the first drivers of a safety bike at that time, which he had to import from England because it was the best fast vehicle to drive from construction site to construction site in order to control, to take care that everything is running smoothly. So we even have a picture of Robert Bosch on this bicycle. So a very modern appearance of a man who drives the most advanced vehicle you could afford at that time.
So not only was he an entrepreneur, he was also a dyed-in-the-wool early adopter. That's a man after my own heart. I love it.
Okay.
That's great.
Of course.
And Dietrich, can you just give me a little hint? So you said he grew that first workshop from 2 to 20. Do you have an idea of about how long it took to have that growth?
It took around about 10 years.
Okay.
But he was not aware that his company would grow so rapidly. But when we talk about the years after having found his balance, being a workshop for electrical engineering, there was a big bang. And I think this is what we should talk about next.
Yes.
I'm talking about the Magneto ignition system for cars.
Of course.
It was not his invention, but he was the man to convert this ignition system from stationary engines to the motor vehicle, which was, in fact, in its childhood. You know, just to give you a number, when Robert Bosch founded his little company in 1886 on Stuttgart roads, there was only one motor vehicle, and that was the car that Carl Benz had created exactly in the year when Robert Bosch founded his company. But this business started to grow, and Robert Bosch seemed to have had the right innovation for that new business area.
It's fascinating, not only how critical it was to the organization's success, but also how much it sticks with us today. Magneto ignition is arguably the most crucial device for the career for Robert Bosch as an entrepreneur, but then also for the growth of the company. A little fun fact for our listeners. Our internal newspaper is called Bosch Zünde, and Zünde means igniter.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, John. He wanted to have a magazine for all employees in order to get them well informed worldwide. And so the symbol of his success, because in fact he became a leading supplier for the automotive industry worldwide at that time.
Of course.
From 1900 on. So
and still,
this was a simple reason. Yes, this was a reason to give that magazine that name. And it was a wonderful initiative, and I think one of the oldest employees newspapers that we have, at least in Europe.
That's pretty. That's another anchor point to show the consistency and the longevity of the organization, which again, as a Bosch fanboy, I take as a point of pride. Coming back to the content about the Magneto itself. Now, of course, our dear From Know-How to Wow listeners do have quite the technical orientation. Lots of computer science and electrical engineers in our demographics, but I'm aware that not everyone is super clear on exactly what a Magneto ignition is. So we thought to share with you a little bit about how it works. We would bring back Melena to replay an interview that Robert Bosch had in 1941. Here is Melena.
3 things are necessary for an engine to work: fuel, air, and a spark. The spark is created by a spark plug by way of electricity. This electric current is generated by an ignition magneto. The magneto was crucial for Robert Bosch's success, but it wasn't his invention. He tells the story in a 1941 radio interview.
Im Sommer 1887 kam ein kleiner Maschinenbauer zu mir.
He says it was the summer of 1887 when someone asked him to build a device similar to those that another company, the Deutz Motor Company, equipped their motors with. He could have a look at one of them at a place not far from Stuttgart. So Robert Bosch went and investigated the device. After checking that it hadn't been patented, he started building a magneto. But he didn't just copy what he saw.
Dieses Deutzer Muster habe ich dann noch verbessert und damit zunächst.
He says he improved the device. For instance, he used different types of magnets that made it more reliable. This magneto ignition was used for stationary engines that operated at relatively low speeds. Bosch's small workshop produced 9 magnetos in the following year. 3 years later, they sold more than 100 magnetos. With that, the Magneto provided the basis for Bosch as a company.
Aus diesem wurde im Laufe der Jahre das, was man den Bosch-Magnet hieß, der für meine Firma...
It was of unexpected importance for his company, for traffic on land, sea, and in the air, and for the world economy, Bosch says. And this was the deciding factor for Bosch's success. He converted traditional technology, the magneto for stationary engines, into a device for the automobile, solving a main problem that slowed down the car's success. That's largely thanks to his engineers Arnold Seringer and Gottlob Honold, who vastly improved the magneto in the years around the turn of the century. For instance, they added a secondary coil with a much higher number of windings compared to the primary coil. This enables the device to create the high voltages needed for engines running at higher speeds. So their work made the magneto suitable for use in vehicles, such as some of the first cars or even Zeppelins. Bosch's company expanded rapidly. In addition to the growing factory in Stuttgart, he built a factory in Paris in 1905. In 1906, he started selling magnetos to American automotive companies. Today, magnetos are no longer used in cars, since the electricity is provided by batteries. But you can still find them in lawnmowers, chainsaws, and aircraft.
Thank you very much, Melena. Now, one thing that was striking for me there, Robert Bosch said, the magneto changed the world economy. I have to ask the question, is that hubris speaking, or can we really see it at that level of impact and importance?
In fact, Robert Bosch helped to fuel motorization with his ignition system.
Sure, yeah.
It gave a boost for motorization.
Mm-hmm.
And the simple reason is that there was no ignition system on the way which could really lead the automotive industry and the automobile to a success. A pioneer of the automobile, Carl Benz, once said, die Zündung ist das Problem der Probleme. The ignition is the problem of the problems.
Uh-huh.
And this problem found a solution with our company founder, Robert Bosch. So when I go back to the 1890s, there were 2 systems that could be used. The one was battery powered, limiting the range of an automobile to 20 or 30 kilometers. And the other one was an ignition system with a glow tube, burning down several cars at that time, by the way.
Oof.
So a very dangerous system.
Definitely not passing today. Yeah.
No. Another pioneer, Wilhelm Maybach, said every car with a glow plug ignition must burn down at a definite point of time.
Wow,
so
that's a statement. Okay.
You see this statement is very strong, even though Maybach worked for Daimler, who invented this system which worked with a burning flame. And so Robert Bosch definitely had the only solution which allowed the car to become a transport vehicle for people and for goods, even on long distances. Just have in mind, the first car race from Nizza to La Turbie in 1899 in France was only 9 kilometers.
Huh.
In 1903, with Bosch ignition, the first race from Paris to Madrid could take place. And the 1907 car race over 2 continents from Paris to Beijing could never have taken place.
No, never.
Without a Bosch ignition system. And so you see the importance. Robert Bosch was not a man to honor himself. So he was a very modest man. He wouldn't have said anything to simulate something he really is not. And so I think it's true. Bosch gave motorization a completely new pace and helped to make the automobile to a day-to-day transport vehicle round about 1900.
Well, those those racing figures that you pointed out certainly illustrate that. No further explanation necessary there. He doesn't need to pat himself on the back when the cars are driving themselves across continents now. This is fascinating. But, of course, we've already praised Robert Bosch a lot in this episode. And now I want to check in with you a little bit, Dietrich. As an icon, that's a big word. How does that hold up? Because certainly there are some chapters of the story that are, let's say, not so glorious. Of course, ignition systems, we've heard this and about their impact. But that they also meant that they were important for the military in 2 world wars. So let's talk a little bit about that. How did he get through those times?
The First World War brought a complete breakdown of the company. Robert Bosch lost all business units outside Germany and had to build up the company again after 1920. So there was a second wave of internationalization. And when the Nazi regime started to rule Germany, it became a very difficult situation of the companies because Robert Bosch was a Democrat. He was in favor of free trade and understanding of the people and the nations. And so there was a conflict between him and the new regime. And he had to find ways in order to keep up the company and at the same way find ways to not just follow the system loyally. So if you look at the facts, the company was employing forced laborers and provided the supply of technology for military vehicles, which helped the Nazi regime to start a war. But at the same time, Robert Bosch supported resistance against the Hitler regime. For example, he was one of the founding members of an organization against anti-Semitism.
That's remarkable.
And he helped people not being deported to concentration camps. And also, he helped Jewish organizations to bring people out of Germany before they came into real danger. So there is 2 stories in parallel. It's not easy to bring both things together.
Sure.
But the loyalty to the system in producing goods for military vehicles meant also to keep the company independent, because
that's right.
Helping opponent to the regimes was only possible in a company that was not under the rule of the Nazis, but still in hands of the company founders and his successor as the CEO of the company, Hans Walz, who also was a Democrat and strongly supported the preparation of the attempt to assassinate Hitler in 1944. And this was very dangerous for Walz. So
of course,
we see 2 sides of a coin when you look at Bosch at that time.
It's fascinating to understand the nuance that you bring to light there. And I think also something to keep in mind is the rebuilding of the company, that second wave of internationalization that you mentioned. That can't be taken for granted. There's so many organizations that did not survive that period of time, and that would, like Bosch, still be around and even flourishing 80 years later. So with that in mind, what do you see, looking back, what did Robert Bosch do to future-proof the company?
There are a couple of different answers to that question, Geoff. First, when we go back to the years around 1910, just before World War I started, at that time Bosch had a sales outside Germany, around about 90%. So it was a very international company with a lot of sales partners all over the world.
I had no idea. That's an incredible ratio. Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Things being manufactured in Germany and shipped to China, Japan, or Brazil, or South Africa, or the United States. And the company lost that after World War I, but carried on to build up international relationships again. But the problem was, and Robert Bosch mentioned that himself, that it's still very dangerous just to rely on one product area, which means ignition system.
Of course.
And so Robert Bosch started a sort of diversification to offer anything electrical that helps to make the car or the truck or the motorbike a reliable partner for traveling or transport. I'm talking about light, horns, direction indicators, windshield wiper, etc. But even that was not enough. Bosch had to become a full liner in other areas outside automotive business in order to find a balance. And there was a very traumatic time, around about 1925, when car sales dropped down by 40% in Europe. And Robert Bosch saw no chance to keep up that business like it was before. And that was a time when diversification came in, going beyond automotive. We have some examples for that when we're talking about household appliances, for example.
Certainly.
The first fridge, 33, the power tools. The first one, which was funny fact, a haircutting machine in 1928.
That's right. I remember that.
And a lot of other things. Some failed, but some were quite successful and helped to build up the structure that we have today with 4 different business areas. Of course, it was very important to more and more set up production facilities, because when you think about shipping technology made in Germany to the United States, you have problem with taxes, with customs. Mm-hmm. And so this was why Bosch set up the first factory in the United States in 1912. And after World War I, the company continued to set up worldwide production facilities in order to become a global supplier of technology. And so diversification was a very strong point to make the company, Geoff, you said it, future-proof.
And that's exactly what made Robert Bosch one of the world's great industrialists. Unfortunately, Robert Bosch didn't live to see any of this future. He passed away in 1942. Can you imagine how proud he would be today to see the scope and scale of the company's product portfolio? It's absolutely incredible. In the beginning, one of the questions was if he's still somehow present in the company. And of course, obviously he is in the name.
Yes, the company is still called Robert Bosch Limited, or what we say in Germany, Robert Bosch GmbH. Mm-hmm. In the United States, for a couple of decades, the company was called Robert Bosch Corporation, and the brand on the products were Robert Bosch. So you see, right. There's a lot of connections between the entire company of today and Robert Bosch as the founder. So the grade of identification with the company founder is quite high among the people who work for Bosch.
So staying focused on the icon and the nice quotes that we have, here's another one.
Improvements in the world of technology and business should always also be beneficial for mankind.
And today, that has become invented for life. Dietrich, thank you so much. I've really personally enjoyed this.
Thank you, Geoff. It was my pleasure.
The pleasure is all ours, and I'm sure, speaking on behalf of our listeners, they enjoyed it just as well. I can somehow say it's a little bit of a dream come true to meet good old Robert, at least in spirit, and hearing the interesting perspective that you bring, having such a depth of knowledge. So, dear listeners, thank you for joining us today. Would love to hear what you have to say that you like about Bosch or even just this podcast. So don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review. Melena, Shuko, myself would really appreciate it, as well as the whole production team. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon.
From know-how to wow. The Bosch Global Podcast.
Next month, we're going back to covering cutting-edge technology. We'll be featuring the latest in smart home technology and how Bosch products matter.